Do you ever feel like you're just sewing different versions of the same pattern over and over again? I promise after watching today's tutorial, you won't feel this pattern is the same way. This pattern, when I sewed it a few years ago, blew my mind with the construction, how it came together, everything about it. This pattern is the first pattern that I had ever sewed from Dog Under My Desk. This is the Curvy Case Duo. I am making the wide version. Not only am I sewing a pattern that I feel like is constructed in a very unique, very different way, I'm sewing with different materials than I typically sew with. For my exterior, I'm using a sublimated fabric. Brittany from the Emporium sells sublimated fabric by the yard. So you can buy the yards of fabric to use if you are someone who sublimates. Also, this print is on pre-order right now. Brittany has several Halloween prints on her pre-order, so definitely check it out. I'll have the link for that. The second thing I'm using in here is for the lining. I'm actually using a felt. I have never sewn with felt. And the last thing I'm using is vinyl. I'm using just a soft, thin vinyl. I did put a layer of woven interfacing on the back of each of these pieces. Kept that in the seam allowance. But outside of the seam allowance, I did a layer of Decaville Light. The pattern calls for a fleece, but I did not want to do a fleece since I'm using a felt. The felt has a little bit of loft to it. You can see it's a little thick, not bad, but I just didn't want this puffy. So my exterior pieces, every one, even my base has a layer of Decaville Light on it. My base also has a layer here in the center of Decaville Heavy. So this is your base piece. You'll need one of these cut out of the vinyl or any material you want. It does not have to be vinyl. Here is your zipper gusset pieces, 2 exteriors, 2 lining. I do have the Decaville Light on the exterior pieces. We have 2 exterior main panels. This is your front and your back. Here is your lining pieces, a different shape. You will have 2 of these on the lining. We are actually making a pouch with pockets inside. It's going to have not only a slip pocket, it's also going to have a zipper pocket. And then we will also have 2 side panel pieces. So that's the materials you need to cut out. I'm also going to use some zipper tape. I'm using a number 5 zipper tape. I'm going to have 2 pull tabs. I'm going to use 3 zipper pulls. I want 2 at the top, and then I want 1 inside for the zipper pocket. And of course I have to use 2 tags from Heartwood and Hyde. Also, I have to have clips. I'm using Lauren's glitter clips. I will be using my stiletto to hold onto the curves at times, and also my hemostats. These are the main things I'm going to be using in this video today. Other than that, let's go ahead and start getting started sewing up the Curvy Case Duo from Dog Under My Desk. To get this tutorial started, I'm going to pull out those 2 main panel pieces and my base. I did go ahead and add my tags to the exterior pieces, and so that was the only step I did off camera. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the bottom of both of these to these sides here. So what we'll do this one at a time, of course. This is the way it'll look at the end, so we just flip it down. Add a clip or 2 in place here. And of course I'll just sew right across this edge, locking in my stitches when I start stopping using that full seam allowance given in the pattern. After we have this sewn, she tells us to grade our seam allowance. That means we're just going to kind of trim it at an angle and just reduce a little bit of the bulk in the corner. If you've ever had your seam allowance showing through or a little bit thick on one side, this is what she's wanting to prevent. So you're definitely not cutting into your stitches, but you're just getting a little bit of that bulk out of the way of the corner, so when we flip it up, it won't be showing through and look very obvious. So now that I have those seam allowance graded, I'm just going to flip this straight up. I want those seam allowances to stay under this main panel. Let's do this from the back so you can kind of see. So this seam allowance will be going up towards that main panel piece. You can take this over to the iron and press it. I could definitely do that with mine, but I am just pressing it right here with my fingers, and I'm going to immediately take it over to my sewing machine, I'm stitching on this top main panel piece, making sure that that seam allowance stays underneath it the entire time. I'm only going to be top stitching 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge all the way down this seam. Repeat those same steps to attach this piece to the bottom of your base piece. This is how your exterior piece should look at this point. Let's go ahead and set that to the side, and I'm going to work on my grab tabs. Now, if you followed the pattern directions, you would probably be folding in your long edges to meet the center. Since I had these scrap pieces, I'm just using them. I'm going to top stitch down both long sides, and I'm actually going to add a few rivets just there in the center to kind of give it a nice touch. But these are just pull tabs. They're just to hold on to because of the design of this. When you open and close, sometimes it's a little tricky to do it. You will not put anything on this. This isn't a crossbody that needs a connector or anything like that. So I'm just going to close mine up. Definitely follow the pattern for this step since mine's a little different. Here's the 2 pull tabs I made. I'm going to set those aside until we're ready to attach them to our zipper gusset. So let's go ahead and pull out those pieces to work on that gusset. Now, I know my zipper doesn't match exactly. I really struggled with finding the perfect zipper, but I didn't want to buy anything, so I just made do with what I had. I know there's probably much prettier, like a nice olive tape would have matched much better. It's okay. First thing I do is I am going to take one of these lining zipper panel pieces and place it right sides up. Felt does not have a right or wrong side, so I am okay and not worried about that at all. Then I will place my zipper tape right sides up. I'm going to just base these 2 in place along this long edge, so starting at this point, going all the way down to the bottom, and just making sure they match up and getting that step out of the way. This is an unnecessary step. You could go ahead and just clip that exterior on too and make kind of a zipper sandwich. I want my pumpkins to be going down from my zipper. What I mean is that I want it to look like this in the end because this will be where the main panel is, so I want it to be kind of looking down on it. So because of that, I want to attach here at this side, so whenever I flip it down, it looks like that. So I'm going to orientate that way. Then I'm going to match up the short edges and then the long edges. This time I'll come in with that full seam allowance. For me, that's pretty much going to be sewing right up against those zipper teeth. Now that you have those pieces sewn together, you're just going to pull them apart. And at this point, I do like to baste the raw edges first, and so that way I can get a better top stitch here. So I'm going to do that. So I'm not clipping or doing anything special to it. I'm just going to be lining it up as I sew and kind of pulling and keeping them in line while I go down this raw edge. This is how the first side looks. Let's go ahead and complete those same steps to complete the other side of this zipper panel. I have both sides of the zipper gusset completed. I put on my 2 zipper pulls and I did trim down the zipper tape. I added rivets to my little pull tabs, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to base them in place. I'm going to have a little bit of overhang on that just for security and just center it onto the zipper tape teeth. So just have it there in the center. Now that we have this portion complete, let's go ahead and pull out that main exterior piece we've been working on. And what we want to do is we want to attach this to here. I'm going to start by placing this right sides together, so exterior to exterior, then pull out those side pieces and we'll have those lining to lining. Let's clip all those in place, or you could do basting stitches, whichever way you feel most comfortable. But for me, I feel like this short edge here, I feel like I can just sew it all together at once, but definitely feel free to baste it however you want to. So I'm going to take my time, line everything up, and now I'm just going to sew across here with the seam allowance given in the pattern, using the full seam allowance, back stitching when I start and stop. Now what you do is you're going to pull these pieces apart. And so I want my lining piece, this side piece, to go under this piece. We are going to top stitch on that base. So we're not top stitching on the zipper panels, but on this base piece, or through these side pieces here. So we are going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch away. So this is what I have. Let's go ahead and pull this over to this other side and repeat that same process. So now my exteriors are together. Pull out that other side piece and line it up as well. Your top stitching on this side is going to be a little bit trickier, but can still be done. We're just going to be really careful. Just be careful that you're keeping everything out of the way and you're getting a proper top stitch, even though it's a little bit of an awkward holding position. So what we're going to do now is make sure that we have the center marks on our gusset and the center marks on our main panel pieces. We are going to pull these up and match them. We want to be really careful to make sure we take the time to match up the center marks. I'm the worst for sometimes eyeballing things, but this is not the pattern to do that on. You would make, like, it would be hard to have it perfect, and it would really affect the outlook of the end of the bag. I'm going to clip that same way to the other side and go ahead and get both of these done at the same time. So again, just matching up the centers and putting a few clips. What we're doing now is we're just going to baste these two pieces together just about 2 inches here at the top. We are doing this because we do not want to lose that center when we're sewing. If we lose the center, it'll look crooked, it'll be off. So I am going to just push everything aside, and I'm going to baste this in place. I'm checking to make sure everything looks good and like I'm not having any kind of major overhang or gapping or anything like that. Everything looks great. Now I'm going to work on these corners. We have 4 corners here, so we're going to work on those. What we're going to do is we're going to clip this all together. Go ahead and kind of clip here, and you can see how it's wanting to line up. So this is how this side looks. This part's out of the way. And what we're going to do now is we're going to sew just up until that zipper seam is. We're not going to sew over it, but we're going to get as close as we can to it. I know this is in the way. I'm going to try to smash it down a little, but basically I'm just sewing up until I get to that zipper seam, and then that's when I'll stop. So you can see that I did that corner. Let's smooth everything back out. I'm just sewing these 2 pieces and I come right up to that seam. That is all I'm doing there. This is all open still. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to repeat all of those steps for these other corners. Everything. So I have sewn all 4 of these corner sides. These side pieces are not attached. This opening here is not attached. This is just a basting stitch. So what we are going to do now, and you can see that bottom is like perfectly there on the bottom. Everything is great. So I love this pattern. What we're going to do now is we're going to close up this area here, and we're also going to make for sure that we catch all of this. So put that side panel, push it down, and let's start clipping all around here. So I'm going to clip that down, and then I'm going to go ahead and clip these pieces all in place, because now's the time we're going to come in with the full seam allowance and sew all around this. We're going to start about 1/2 of an inch below that zipper gusset seam, but the thing we have to make for sure is these stitches right there, I have to connect them. So even if I have to go a little bit further down than 1/2 of an inch, which mine pretty much will be exactly that, that's fine. If I come down 1/2 inch, I want to meet them, but we've got to make sure we connect these stitches. We do not want to leave an opening here. Don't know how much you're going to see of me sewing this. I'm going to try to show it, but if it's really bad, I'll just speed it up. I'm going to put it under the needle this way, and I'm just going to rotate it around to sew on this other side.
If I feel like anything is shifting, I'll use my hemostats. I will be watching the seam allowance. It's very important for me to get that proper seam allowance all the way around this and to keep everything in line. Here is everything sewn. It is all sewn together. We still have these two unattached, but there's a little bit attached right there. That is what we want to see. Everything looks good from the top. I'm going to check and make for sure my seam allowances look normal. If like right here I see a little dip in the seam allowance, I'll probably just go back and correct that spot there. But other than that, everything looks good. And then I'm going to repeat those same steps to complete this other side. Pull out one of your lining main pieces and place it right sides up. Take one of your zipper lining pocket pieces and place it right sides down, so they are right sides together. The pattern gives you the measurements of how to place everything and how to draw the zipper box. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew from one end to the other of this line. I am not sewing down these short edges, so I will back stitch on both the top and bottom, these sides, whenever I start and stop, and I'm just going to sew directly on those lines. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this in half and just make a snip down the middle. Then I'll open it back up and start cutting towards the edge. When I get about a half of an inch away, I'm going to angle to make a kind of an inverted triangle, and I'm going to get as close to those stitches as I can without going through the stitches. We are definitely not cutting those stitches. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to push this lining through the opening, and then I'm going to take it over the iron and press everything flat. Now that I have that pressed open and I can see just a little bit of the lining from this front, it's just going to have to stay that way. I'm going to go ahead and take my zipper pull and I'm going to center the teeth in the middle of this opening, and then I'm just going to stitch 1/8 of an inch around. Stitched around this opening. Something to note is that I always do make for sure whenever I don't sew the boxes closed in the original step that I make sure those little triangles are pulled back and I stitch over them to secure them down. So now that I have that step done, I'm going to flip this over, grab that other lining piece, place it directly on top of the other zipper pocket lining piece. Then I'm just going to sew around the 3 edges. I'm leaving this bottom open. When I sew this, I will sew it with the lining right sides up, and I will just flip it back so that I can see. I want to sew as close to this spot as I can because I like to secure that down too. I back stitch when I start here at the bottom, and here I'm going over that just to get an extra step on that little overhang piece. I go all the way up to the top, and then that's whenever I turn and go over the rest of the way. I'm going to trim up my zipper tape and my overhang of this zipper lining pocket, and then we'll move on to the slip pocket. Let's go ahead and pull out that last lining pocket piece and take this bottom edge and fold it with this top edge right sides together. Add a few clips, and then let's sew along this long edge, back stitching when we start and stop. The pattern tells us to go ahead and press this seam open. You can take this over to the iron if you want, or you can just finger press it. I'm going to make sure I have that seam pressed open and going down both sides. I'm going to, so in a sense, butterfly, and I'm going to place a few clips along these short edges that are unsewn. We are going to sew down both of the short sides with the seam allowance given the pattern. On one side, we'll sew from the top to the bottom. On the other side, we'll leave a small opening so that we can turn this through. Let's again reduce some of that bulk in the corner by grading those seams or just kind of curving them inward. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this through this opening here. This will take a few minutes because it's a small opening there. Then I will use my stiletto to poke out the corners, and I'll give it a good press over at the iron. Here's that slip pocket, turned right sides out and pressed. Here is the opening right here. I just pushed those edges in and pressed it flat. I'm going to top stitch along the top edge about 1/8 of an inch away. I'm going to pull out that last lining piece I have, and then the pattern tells me how far up from the bottom that I'm going to place this slip pocket. I have the placement up from the bottom correct. I have this pocket centered from left to right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew down the center of this, making 2 separate compartments for this slip pocket. Now that we have that center line in the middle, we still don't have anything else. We just have it attached by that line. The pattern tells us how far in we're going to shift this pocket because we're wanting to leave a little bit of extra room here. So I have these pinned in place. Just going to top stitch down this side. I am not going across the bottom yet. I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch away, definitely making sure as always that I back stitch when I start and stop. So this is what it looks like at this point. We have a lift on both pockets and we need to attach that bottom. So I'm going to use my fingers and just kind of smash that excess over to the middle. So what we're going to do is we are going to push those down so they both meet in the middle. And this is what it'll look like. A slight bit of open, like a 3D dimension on the top, but this bottom will be sewn flat with the extra gathering in the middle. I'm also going to grab out one of these woven labels. This is from Puntillas y Nudos, and I'm going to just slip it in the bottom when I'm sewing. So it'll go right there, and I will just kind of sew it in place whenever I top stitch along this bottom edge. I'm going to use a little bit of glue just to kind of help myself so I don't have to worry about things shifting so much. I'm going to glue these 2 pieces together because they were shifting whenever I was holding them. And then I'll also use a little bit of glue on the back just to kind of secure it so that it doesn't move around so much, and I can make sure I have the proper placement. I'm going to stitch from this side to the middle. I'll break my stitches back stitching, and then I'll do the same thing for the other side. You can see that there is no opening here at the bottom. Those 2 pocket pieces, the excess meets right there. You can see it's just a little bit of a lip there, a nice little feature on the pocket. I'm trimming up my threads, but then that means that our exteriors and linings are ready to be put together. These are the only pieces you should have at this point. Make sure that you do have those marks from the pattern piece on your lining pieces. Keep them in the seam allowance. And to finish up this pouch, what we do is we make sure we know where the center mark is on our lining piece and the center mark on both of these top pieces. We're going to take the center mark on this pocket. I have my zipper. I'm using the zipper pocket first. I have it opened. I also have this slightly opened here too. So I take this mark at the center and I place it over here on this one. Match up those 2 center marks. And I'm just going to place a few clips here. We're going to do that same little basting step that we did earlier. This is again so that we don't lose that curve in that center and have a lopsided pouch. So I have that center secured. What we're going to do is we're going to sew that same top curve of these pieces all together. So I'm going to start matching up this curve all the way around. You can see the zipper is inside there. We're going to clip this mark here, this seam, this came from the pattern piece. We're going to match it to this zipper side seam. That's where we are wanting these pieces to end up. We're going to kind of curve them around. It's going to be a little tricky. If you need to open up your zipper, you can. But you can see mine is coming right to it, but I'm pulling and tugging to get it to match there. I'm going to do the same thing on that other side. So this is what it looks like. So weird. So what you're going to do now is I am going to start sewing here, and I'm going to back stitch really well. I'm going to go all the way across to here with the seam allowance in the pattern. You are sewing directly on those previous stitches that you already sewed once before, so you should be able to see them, should be able to find them pretty easily. We should not be sewing through this side yet because it's down lower than that, so don't worry about that piece. We're just sewing the exterior and the lining, tops, and a little bit of the sides together. Now what I want to do is I want to take my lining and my side, and I'm going to match them up so that I can sew them together. I'm first going to start by clipping these in place, and we should have overhang on this piece here. The pattern tells us exactly how much overhang we should have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing a little bit away from the bottom here. The pattern tells us exactly how far away from the bottom, but it's basically your seam allowance. You want to leave that opening there so you have the overhang from your lining. That's expected and what you want. I want to sew as close as I can to match those stitches that I just sewed. Basically, there'll be a point where we're kind of attaching all these pieces together at this pivot point here. I'm just sticking my hand in there to see if I have any gap, and I don't have any gapping, so I am okay on that. It is attached good enough. If you have any gapping, come down from this side and catch that. We just don't want an opening there, of course. So now that I've got that side sewn, I'm going to come over here and do the same thing with the other side. You can see on this part that my lining kind of slipped a little over, so I'm going to pick those stitches and just pull it straighter so that it can fit a little bit better. So where mine was trying to go back here, I really want it up front, so I do want those all in line there. So I just have to shift a little and catch that again. No problem, it happens. So now on this side, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull these two pieces together to sew them. Again, we start sewing with these two lining pieces separate, and then we will come, and when we get here, we will join them and kind of sew for a little bit to connect them all to make sure there's no gaps or openings there. So I know that this all looks crazy, but just trust the process and continue on. So now what I want to do is I want to flip this. So I'm just going to reach through the bottom here, not through the zipper pocket, just through the bottom, and kind of flip it out so that I can see that other side of the lining. So this is the lining. We have it all kind of crazy looking. There's the side. We have overhang. This is how it looks. We're going to do that same process, attaching the lining over to this side. Find that center mark. If you don't have it, go ahead and find it now. And then place it right sides together over here. So you can see I'm just lining it up, clipping, and I'm going to do that same process. I'm going to baste first just to secure that center spot there at the top. Then I'm going to sew from seam to seam all the way around, and then I will match up the sides and sew them. After I get those steps done, we'll come back and go through the rest of the bag. We're really almost done, just a few more steps. Now at this point, you're going to be thinking there is no way that this pouch is going to turn out cute. Trust the process. I know it looks really crazy, but that's the way it works. So here is that lining. It's all crumpled up inside there. Go ahead and clip the bottom of the lining together. It'll be right sides together. Now you're going to sew across that bottom seam with the seam allowance in the pattern all the way across, definitely back stitch. At this point, you're supposed to press this seam open. Now I'm working with felt, so mine's not really going to press open and stay open so much, but definitely do that if you have that option. And so now what you're going to do is you're going to take your sides and pull them flat to box them and stitch across. Since you left the seam allowance unsewn there at the bottom, this should fit in nicely, and it should match up exactly to those stitches where you stopped previously. And so there shouldn't be any gaps, but if there is, go ahead and take care of that now too. Here's the bottom and here's the side. I just have them matching. I opened up that seam, and now I'm going to stitch across here with that seam allowance. And I should be able to get like everything connected. If I see any gapping, I will address it right now because it would leave a hole in the bag then. Okay, so that side's closed, and we'll do the same thing with this other side. I trimmed up my seams just a little bit, but not too much, just basically left them alone. I'm going to stick my hand in through that zipper pocket, open everything up with that main exterior, and just start slowly pulling this out. This will take a few minutes, but before I do that, I'm gonna just trim up these corner seams just a little bit. With a bag like this, we definitely need to do some shaping, but even before I do any shaping, look at that inside. Look how snug it fits. Look how awesome this shape is. Just me finger pushing out these seams. Look at that. That is gorgeous. It is simply stunning. I could never be a pattern designer because I could have never dreamed this up. Now I'm definitely going to put clips in here, but I'm going to zip this up just to show you what it looks like and just so you get an idea of it, of how adorable this is. Let me get a better view of this. So I want to change my camera angle. Here we go. Look at this. Now I have not closed up that zipper pocket lining. I'm not going to show that. You guys know how to do that, but look at how adorable this is. Look at this shape even before I clip anything. Look at how gorgeous it is. I'm telling you, on the bottom, look, I know that I get a little too excited over it, but this pouch is so cute, and I've sewed several of these and they never turn out bad. Even though that pattern, when you're sewing it, it looks crazy and you're thinking there's no way this is going to turn out like super cute, it always turns out perfect. She's magic. I don't know. All of her patterns are really, really good. I'm a huge fan of her patterns. I feel like she's very educational in the patterns. So this is Dog Under My Desk. The designer is Erin. This is the Curvy Case Duo. Mine is the wide version. If you don't have any of her patterns, I highly suggest trying one. This one's maybe slightly advanced. I have a little puckering I see right here. I'm going to try to push that out and get rid of it. This print is from Brittany from the Emporium. It's a pre-order that's open right now. It will be closing, I think, on the 3rd. She has several Halloween prints that are super cute. They're not spooky so much as they are just cute in an adorable way. So not really like a creepy Halloween, no horror there, just cute little fun prints. Tags are from Heartwood and Hyde. Thank you again for watching another tutorial of mine, and I hope today in your sewing room that you just try a pattern that's a little more challenging, that really makes you believe in the process and follow it and have faith and just have an adorable little make. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.